At the reading, my parents smiled as the lawyer handed Tavia a check for $10 million. Their smiles were wide, almost too perfect, and their eyes sparkled in a way that made my stomach twist. Then they turned to me and said, "Go earn your own." I didn't cry. I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. I just stared at the shiny table in front of me. I tried very hard to pretend my heart wasn't pounding in my chest. It felt like it was trying to jump out of my body. I could hear my pulse thumping in my ears, loud and fast. Then something shifted in the room. An older man in a gray suit stood up. He looked serious and calm at the same time, like he had seen everything before and nothing could surprise him. "There's one more document," he said. He opened a worn envelope with careful hands. I saw my grandfather's handwriting on it, blocky, neat letters that slanted just a little to the right. My mother's smile disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. My father's fingers twitched nervously, and Tavia's eyes got narrow, sharp, like a cat about to pounce. That envelope changed everything. I didn't know it yet, but this envelope would start a storm that would tear through all the lies my parents had built around me. And it started at a place I hadn't seen in over a year, my grandfather's ranch on the edge of Charleston. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where you watching this from, and what time of day is it. I remembered this place from when I was younger. Back then, the wind on the ranch felt safe, like a warm hug. But now the wind felt heavy, like it was carrying secrets I didn't know yet. I hadn't been back to the ranch since the spring before my grandfather passed away. It was strange how something so familiar could suddenly feel strange. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out of the car, and the wind chimes on the porch, which used to make happy music on summer afternoons, now sounded empty and sad. I paused for a long moment before knocking. The white paint on the front door had chipped again, just like it always had. The magnolia trees in the yard still leaned a little too far to the east. But I didn't feel welcome here, not really. When the door creaked open, I half expected silence. But instead I heard my grandmother's voice. "So, you finally decided to show up." Her voice hadn't changed at all. It was still sharp and clear, like it could cut glass. Her arms were crossed over her chest and her jaw looked hard as stone. I froze in place, trying to figure out what she was feeling. Was she happy to see me? Confused? Relieved? But her face didn't show any of that. It was cold. "Grandma, what's going on?" I asked, stepping a little closer to her. "They told me you were too busy, that you didn't want to be bothered, that you had a new life," she said. Her voice shook just a little, then became hard again. "Your grandfather called for you, Maris. Every day right up until he died. He asked for you." I swallowed hard. My throat suddenly felt very dry. "That's not true. I tried to call. I even came by in March. Tavia said no one was home." My grandmother's eyes narrowed, sharp as knives. "We were here. We were always here." There was a long, quiet pause. Then she turned and walked into the house without another word. I followed her in. The air inside felt thick, like the walls were holding their breath and waiting for something. She came back holding a worn leather notebook. "This is the number he kept calling," she said, handing it to me. I recognized his handwriting immediately. It was the same blocky, neat style I had always known, with a slight tilt to the right. "But this isn't my number," I said. "I've had the same one since college." "They told us you changed it, that you didn't want to be tracked down, that you were ashamed of us," she said softly. "No," I said, stepping back against the wall. "They lied to you. They cut me off on purpose." Her hands shook slightly as she sank slowly into the floral armchair next to the fireplace. Her knees bent as if they had given up on holding her up. "They told me the funeral was at noon," I whispered. "I got there and it was empty." She looked up at me, her face pale. "The funeral was at 9, she said quietly. "They told everyone you didn't show up, that you didn't care." My chest tightened. I would never ever have missed his funeral. Never. For a long moment the room was quiet. Too quiet. And then I felt it, like a dam breaking inside me. My chest hurt, my vision blurred, and I sank down next to her, holding her hand like a child. "I didn't know," I said. "I didn't know he was sick until it was too late." Her voice softened as she brushed her hand against mine. "We know the truth now. That's what matters. We know." We sat there for a long time. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of everything that had been left unsaid. The old clock on the mantel ticked louder than I remembered. Outside, the wind picked up and blew dry leaves across the porch like restless little ghosts. Finally, my grandmother stood up. Her hands trembled slightly, but there was fire in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "I'm calling them," she said. "Calling who?" I asked. She didn't answer at first. She walked over to the old rotary phone on the kitchen wall, the one Grandpa never wanted to replace, and began dialing. Each click of the dial felt important, like a drumbeat. Her fingers were thin from age but steady and strong. When the line connected, her voice turned cold. "Betty, I need you, Jacob and Tavia. Be here now." A muffled voice protested, but she cut it off. "No. It can't wait. Be here in an hour." She hung up the phone without saying goodbye. Then she turned to me. "The lawyer is on his way too. Grandpa's lawyer. He left instructions that things could only be read with everyone here. That's what we're going to do." I didn't say anything. I just nodded, my hands shaking a little. For the next hour, I sat at the small kitchen table, tracing my finger along the edge of the wood. This was the same table where Grandpa had sipped his morning coffee while reading the science journals I sent him from college. Where he first asked about my bee communication study. Where I had told him I wanted to study plant memory, and he had not laughed at me. I looked around the kitchen. Same curtains. Same hum from the old refrigerator. But the air felt different now, heavier. Footsteps echoed on the porch. The doorbell rang. Grandma placed a hand on my shoulder. "Stay here. I'll call you when it's time." From the kitchen I could hear them arrive one by one. My mother's voice, too sweet. "Oh my goodness. It smells exactly the same here." My father's calm voice. "I thought this was handled already." Tavia sighed. "Seriously, couldn't this wait until the estate was finished?" Then silence. And then Grandma's voice, colder than I had ever heard. "Please sit down. Mr. Quentin Harlow is on his way. He will be reading Alaric's final instructions." I imagined their faces, confused, curious, a little annoyed. They didn't know I was here. They didn't know what was about to happen. But deep down, I hoped maybe just once someone would say out loud what I had always known in my heart. That silence, lies, and manipulation weren't love. They were choices. The front door creaked again. I heard a new voice. Steady, professional. "The lawyer. This won't take long," he said. "But it must be done properly." That was my cue. Grandma called out, "Maris, come in now." I stood. My heart raced. As I stepped through the kitchen doorway into the living room, 3 heads turned in my direction. Their eyes went wide. Their faces changed all at once. My mother's smile froze. My father's jaw tightened. Tavia's face turned pale. They weren't just surprised. They were terrified. My mother blinked like she had seen a ghost. My father adjusted his collar nervously. Tavia's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had ripped her script away in the middle of a performance. Kept my back straight. If they were expecting me to cower or cry, they were wrong. Grandma gestured to an empty armchair across from them. I sat down slowly, steadying my breath. Mr. Harlow, the lawyer, gave me a quick nod, polite but unreadable. Then he opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "This," he began, "is the last will and testament of Alaric R. Lucian, recorded and sealed per his request. He has also included a handwritten letter to be read aloud." No one spoke. The lawyer cleared his throat and began. "To my wife, Rowena Whitman." Grandma didn't even blink. "I leave our family ranch, the house, and enough money for your comfort and care. She knows how to find the rest." Then he turned the page. "To my granddaughter, Maris Lucian." The room felt smaller, tighter. I felt it in my chest. "I leave the Whitman Research Annex at 317 Laurel Creek Road, Charleston, including all laboratory equipment, funding accounts, and active research patents, as well as intellectual property filed under Lucian Innovation." A gasp, not mine. My mother's eyes darted to Tavia. I kept my hands folded. Mr. Harlow continued, "Finally, the rest of my estate, money, stocks, and retirement funds, will be divided equally between my 2 granddaughters, Maris and Tavia Lucian." There it was, a quiet, elegant balm. But the explosion came right after. Tavia jumped up. Her chair scraped across the floor. "What?" she spat. "He gave her the annex. The whole laboratory. That's insane. You told me it would all be mine. If I just kept visiting him, if I smiled and played nice, it would all be mine." My father stayed quiet. My mother stared at the floor like it could swallow her whole. I just watched, calm as everything they had built for themselves began to crumble. Mr. Harlow raised one hand calmly. There's more. Mr. Whitman also wrote a personal letter to Maris, which he wanted read aloud in this room in front of the family. Tavia let out a bitter laugh. No one joined in. Grandma took a folded letter from the drawer next to her. He wrote this the week before he died, she said. He made me promise. The lawyer unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the paper. Grandpa's handwriting was broad, confident, and filled the page. To my dear Maris, Mr. Keene began reading. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. But I still believe in you even more than ever. The words felt like a warm wind through an open window. They made my chest feel tight, but not in a bad way. You were always quiet, always watching, always thinking. You asked questions when others didn't care to. You noticed things that no one else noticed. Tavia slumped back into her chair. Mom's hands twisted together nervously in her lap. Dad looked out the window as if he were hoping the words wouldn't reach him. The room was full of tension, but I could feel the weight of every single word Mr. Keene read. You made your own truth in a family that didn't know how to honor it, Mr. Keene continued. I felt something inside me change. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was understanding. I realized slowly that you were never a mistake. You were the thing I was proudest of. Tears blurred my eyes, but I didn't turn away. I wanted everyone in the room to hear every word, to feel the meaning of each sentence. I remembered when you were 7 holding that little notebook, writing down how long it took raindrops to fill a glass. I remembered how happy you were discovering patterns while everyone else only saw noise. My chest felt tight and I suddenly remembered that I still had that notebook. Mr. Keene went on. I saw your happiness fade when your mom ignored you. I saw how your dad would change the subject when you were proud of something. You sparkled in ways they couldn't see. And instead of learning your language, they shut you out. Tavia crossed her arms. I don't blame her completely. She was doing what she thought was right. But you, Maris, you wrote your own story and that takes courage. A tear slid down my cheek. I remembered the day I won my first science fair and asked you to hide the trophy. You whispered, maybe if I don't show it, they'll stop looking at me like I belong to someone else. Somewhere across the room I heard a low sigh. Maybe Dad. Maybe Mom. But it didn't matter. You deserved to be celebrated, Maris. Not ignored. And even if I couldn't fix the past, I could give you something that was yours alone. A place to build, to explore, to grow without needing anyone's permission. Mr. Keene paused and folded the letter slowly. The room was quiet, but it was full of memories, anger, sadness, and a new feeling, clarity. I cleared my throat and spoke softly. I remember that science fair. Mom didn't come. She went to Tavia's dress rehearsal instead. Tavia flinched as if I had thrown a pebble at her. I came home holding that trophy like it was a mistake, I continued. Dad finally spoke. Maris, now isn't the time to talk about this. But I said, it is the only time. All I ever heard was, why can't you be more like your sister? I looked at Tavia. And from you? Every time I tried to be proud of something, you made it seem like a threat. She scoffed. Oh, come on. You always acted like the victim. I worked for what I got. I nodded. You mean visiting Grandpa only when it was easy? Smiling when you were told to? Saying the right things because you wanted something? And then disappearing for years? That wasn't distance, it was erasing me. Mom stood up, her face red with frustration. Enough, Maris. You're twisting things. This family has been through so much. Grandma interrupted sharply, her voice firm but sad. No. This family has been lying and I let it happen too long. I watched you all ignore Maris's pain. I believed you when you said she didn't care. I should have known better. Dad shifted nervously in his seat as if he could disappear into the floor. Look, Maris had education camps, trips. That wasn't free, I said firmly. Grandpa paid for everything, scholarships, flights, journals. You didn't even know half the time where I went. You made me feel like a burden. He made me feel seen. Tavia stood up now, her hands shaking. This is ridiculous. I stayed. I was the good daughter. No, I said calmly, though my voice was firm. You were the performer. I was the hidden one. But Grandpa didn't forget me. And now you can't erase me anymore. Tavia's face twisted. Why should you get anything? Just because you're a sad little genius in a lab coat. I smiled slightly, not a big smile, just a small one. No. I get something because I earned his love honestly. That's the one thing you never understood. Love isn't a performance. Grandma stood slowly. Her legs moved carefully, but she was strong. I regret that Alaric left you anything, she said, looking at Tavia. You may have played the role, but it was never love. It was a transaction. And I am ashamed I didn't see it sooner. Leave. You are not welcome here. Mom gasped. Ply. Out. Grandma said again firmly, now. Tavia grabbed her bag and stormed out, heels hitting the floor like loud drum beats. Mom and Dad followed, stunned, talking about legal stuff. And for the first time they couldn't take anything with them. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to feel. The room was quiet. Not tense, not angry, just free. Grandma walked past me and sat on the sofa, her hands calm now. They'll come back, I whispered. Maybe, she replied softly. But this time we don't have to let them in. It took a while to sink in. I had always tried to earn love from people who didn't have it to give. Grandpa had seen that long before I did. I think I need air, I said. Grandma nodded and I stepped onto the back porch. The boards creaked under my feet. The sound had once meant home. Now it meant change. The magnolia trees were still blooming. Their petals smelled sweet in the morning sun. Beyond the fence, the same red dirt field where Grandpa let me build my first greenhouse as a kid. It had collapsed after 2 weeks, but he called it a perfect disaster and we laughed about it for years. I thought of that girl, 10 years old, knees dirty, eyes bright, and wondered how long she had been buried under other people's expectations. I realized that she had always been me. That girl had never really disappeared. She had just been hidden. When I went back inside, Grandma had placed a kettle on the stove. She moved slowly but carefully, making every step feel like it mattered. You know, she said quietly, Alaric started planning that research building 5 years ago before he got sick. He wanted you to have a place to be yourself. Tears came quietly, cleanly. No shaking, no gasps, just release. That night I stayed in my old room for the first time in years. The wallpaper was faded. The mattress was too soft. But the ceiling still had the glow-in-the-dark stars Grandpa helped me stick up when I was 9. I had made him arrange them like real constellations. He hadn't questioned it. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt like it was mine again. My room felt safe. My memories didn't hurt anymore. They just reminded me how strong I was. The next morning I made coffee and brought it to Grandma at the kitchen table. She smiled tiredly but warmly, the kind of smile that said she understood everything without needing words. So what now? She asked. I think I should go see it, I said. The new lab. Grandma nodded. Grandpa would have liked that. The sunlight broke across the magnolia branches. For the first time in a long while I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't feel invisible. That was more than money or an inheritance. It was the first real gift I had ever received from this family. Grandpa left me something better than legacy. He left me permission to begin again. The first time I saw the lab, it didn't look like a lab at first. It looked like an old barn. Big, dusty, and a little strange. But inside was magic. It had been completely fixed up. Glass windows let in the morning light. Tables had clean lab equipment. Microscopes, centrifuges, computers, and even a 3D printer still wrapped in plastic. Shelves held unopened boxes with my name. In the middle was my workbench. On top, my childhood notebook. The one I thought I had lost in college. Pages torn, messy handwriting, tiny drawings of honeybee communication. My knees almost gave out. Grandpa hadn't just built me a lab. He had built me a home for my mind. Over the next few weeks I moved in fully. I unpacked boxes slowly, carefully, remembering all the little things Grandpa had collected for me. He had thought of everything: magnifying glasses, reference books, notebooks, even snacks for late nights. I asked 2 friends, Yara and Leaf, to help me. They were both from my university program. They were smart, stubborn, and kind. We started small. A local grant for microirrigation research and a partnership with a local farming group to test crop rotations. We made mistakes. Equipment broke. Computers froze. Experiments didn't work. The data didn't make sense. We cried sometimes, feeling frustrated and hopeless. But we kept coming back. Every day. We learned slowly. Every failure taught us something new. The lab became more than a building. It became a place where ideas could grow. A place where being too quiet, too smart, or too intense wasn't a problem. A place where laughter and mistakes were allowed. A place that felt like home. We planted seeds. We watched them grow. We measured, recorded, and learned together. Each tiny success felt enormous. Even small breakthroughs made us cheer and dance around the lab. We discovered patterns, solved problems, and built things we had only imagined before. Sometimes at night I would sit at the workbench and open my old notebook. I read my 7-year-old thoughts, the messy little drawings, and I laughed. I remembered how much I had loved learning, how much I had wanted to see the world in patterns and connections. Grandpa had given me the freedom to chase that love again. I realized something important. I didn't have to earn anyone's love anymore. I didn't have to perform or hide. I didn't have to be anyone but myself. The lab, the work, my friends, Grandma, they all reminded me that I belonged to myself first. And that felt like the greatest gift of all. One afternoon, after a really tough day, I found myself sitting alone in the annex. My project had been turned down again, and it felt like the whole world had decided I wasn't good enough. Everyone else had already gone home. The lights were low, making long shadows stretch across the floor. I sat on the cold wooden floor near the storage closet, surrounded by papers with scribbles, empty coffee cups, and a few pens I had dropped. My head felt heavy and my heart even heavier. I reached into my bag and pulled out Grandpa's letter. It was the one I had asked Mr. Harlow to let me keep, the one I read over and over again whenever I needed hope. I unfolded it carefully. The paper felt soft in my hands, worn from being read so many times. My eyes found the line I had memorized long ago, and I whispered it to the empty room. You wrote your own role. Those words weren't just kind or encouraging. They were advice, instructions from Grandpa. He wanted me to know that I could choose my own path, that I could make my own story. That night I wrote a new plan. It wasn't for another irrigation system like I had tried before. This time it was for a program to help kids learn science in small-town schools. A program for kids like me, quiet, curious, and often overlooked. Kids who loved asking questions even when no one seemed to care about the answers. We called it the Little Scientist Initiative. In our first year we worked with just 12 students. They came from towns where schools still used old, worn-out textbooks, where science experiments were almost unheard of, and where no one had ever brought a microscope to class. We gave each child a leather notebook just like mine with Grandpa's words printed on the first page. Write the things you don't understand. One day the world will. That fall, a shy girl named Avon joined the program. She was barely 13 and her long hair always hung in her face. She kept to herself most of the time, quietly observing everything around her. One day she showed me pages she had filled with notes about bees she had watched on her own. Her calculations were messy, her spelling all over the place, but her brain was brilliant. When I told her that, she looked at me like I had handed her a whole planet. You actually read it? She whispered. I smiled. Of course I did. At that moment I understood something important. This wasn't about replacing what I had lost. It was about planting something new in good soil and letting it grow without fear. This was about giving kids the chance to discover themselves and the world. 3 years after Grandpa's will reading, I got an email. It was from a lawyer, not Mr. Harlow, but someone working for Tavia Whitman. The subject line said only, "Request for visit." First my stomach sank. I worried that she wanted to reopen the will, fight over some clause, or stir up the past we had tried to forget. But when Tavia arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone were the fancy designer shoes, the perfectly done hair, and the makeup she always wore. She had on a navy coat that was too big for her small frame. She walked slowly into the lobby as if she didn't want to take up space. I was standing beside Grandpa's portrait above the reception desk when she paused. "He always knew who you were," she said quietly. "Even when I didn't, especially when I didn't." For a second I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. "I'd like to see it," she added. "The lab, the work, what you've done with it." I could have said no, but I didn't. Instead I gave her a tour. She walked beside me through the greenhouse complexes, the crop development rooms, and the student display wall with photos from our Little Scientist Initiative. She didn't talk much. When she did, her questions were simple and honest. "How do you pay for all this? What's this machine for? Do the kids get to share their results?" When we reached the community garden, she stopped walking. Children were harvesting lettuce. A mother and son laughed together near the compost bins, and a father was testing the soil moisture with one of our field kits. Tavia turned to me, her voice breaking slightly. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I stayed quiet. She didn't cry, but her hands wouldn't stop moving. She tugged her sleeves, traced invisible circles on the railing, and looked at everything like she wanted to remember it all. I let her stay as long as she wanted. No lectures, no yelling, no anger, just honesty. Now we don't talk very often. But twice a year, Tavia volunteers for the youth science camp. She helps the students with presentations, teaching them how to explain complicated ideas in simple words and how to stand with confidence. The kids love her. Some even call her Coach V. At the end of her first summer volunteering, she gave me a folder. I wrote a guide to help shy kids communicate, she said, almost embarrassed. Thought it might help. I opened it that night. It wasn't perfect, but it was thoughtful, kind, and real. For the first time, I saw a version of my sister that didn't scare me. She never said sorry with words, not directly, but she showed up. That is more than I ever expected. And maybe, just maybe, it's enough. We are not sisters in the way other people think. But in this small corner of the world Grandpa dreamed about, we stopped pretending. Somehow that was the start of something real. It has been 6 years since Grandpa's will reading. 6 years since the front door slammed behind my parents and Tavia, their footsteps echoing down the porch like the end of a show nobody clapped for. I haven't spoken to my parents since. Sometimes their names appear in emails I don't open, in charity announcements, or in news articles about money from Florida where they retired. I don't hate them. I just don't miss them. What I think about most is the work. The annex has grown beyond anything I could imagine. One old barn became a full research campus. 4 labs, 3 greenhouses, and over 60 acres of fields. We developed drought-resistant seeds that now feed thousands in parts of the South where normal crops often fail. We partnered with universities in Kenya and Brazil to share our discoveries. Just last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco and accepted a national grant for climate innovation. The lights were bright, but I didn't flinch. I wore a navy blue suit and Grandpa's pocket watch tucked inside my breast pocket, the one Grandma gave me last year. His initials were barely faded. Inside the watch, there was a tiny photo of me at 10 standing proudly next to my honeybee display, smiling from ear to ear. Grandma had told me he carried it everywhere. Now it sits on my desk where the morning sunlight makes little circles of light on my research notes. Some days I talk to him, not with words, just quietly. When experiments fail, when a student from the program wins a scholarship, when I remember how close I came to believing I didn't matter. Grandpa never let me disappear. Not really. Now I understand why. Legacy is not a big statue or a fancy building. Legacy is a map. A map made of choices, kindness, and little anchors left for someone to follow when the world tries to forget them. These days, Grandma lives in a small apartment next to my house. She is slower now and more forgetful, but she is still incredibly sharp. We drink coffee every morning in the sunroom. She tells me stories about Grandpa I have never heard before. How he once planted a tree just to propose, how he believed soil could remember kindness, and how he always knew I would come back. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had to leave to understand what coming back would mean. Some evenings I walk to the far end of the annex fields, past the solar irrigation test beds and the kids' garden plots, to the old wooden bench Grandpa built with his own hands. From there I can see the stars. Real ones, not the glow-in-the-dark ones I stuck to my bedroom ceiling when I was little. But they still remind me of the girl I once was. The one who kept asking why even when no one wanted to answer, the one who refused to be quiet, the one Grandpa believed in. On nights like that, when the wind moves just right through the trees, I swear I can hear his voice in the leaves. Write the things you don't understand. One day the world will. And now finally it does.